You can spend your entire life trying to make everyone around you happy and still end up feeling completely empty. Because no matter how much you give, how much you bend, how much you pretend to be someone you're not, it's never enough. The applause fades, the compliments disappear, and you're left with a version of yourself you barely recognize. The truth is harsh, but it's simple. Trying to please everyone is the fastest way to lose yourself. But stop for a second and ask this question: what if everything you're doing isn't really for you? What if the job you chose, the way you dress, the things you post, even the way you speak, are all shaped by what others expect from you, not by who you really are? This isn't just about social pressure. It's about a life lived on autopilot, driven by fear of judgment and rejection. It's about waking up every day, trying to meet expectations that were never yours to begin with. It's the slow erosion of your authenticity, traded piece by piece for temporary approval. In this video, we're going to break down the invisible prison of needing to be liked. We'll explore the path to emotional freedom, grounded in the wisdom of Stoicism and the bold message behind the courage to be disliked. If you're tired of living a life that doesn't feel like yours, stay with me. Your real freedom starts now. You were not born worried about what others thought of you. You didn't second-guess your feelings, your voice, or your presence. You didn't calculate your worth based on reactions or shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort. As a child, you simply were. You moved through the world with honesty. If you were hungry, you cried. If you were happy, you laughed. If something fascinated you, you chased it without hesitation, without shame. That raw, unapologetic authenticity was your natural state. But then, something started to shift. At first, it was subtle. A frown from a parent when you spoke too loudly. A teacher's scolding when your curiosity stepped outside the lines. Praise when you followed the rules. Disapproval when you didn't. The world began giving you signals, quiet but powerful. You were being taught something, without words, without warning. Being accepted is more important than being real. And so, piece by piece, you began to change. Not because you wanted to, but because you needed to. Because your survival, your belonging, your sense of love and connection started to feel conditional. And this is where the invisible prison begins. It's not built overnight. It's built moment by moment, choice by choice. At first, it looks like learning how to behave. But over time, it becomes something deeper. It becomes a reflex, a mask you wear so well, you forget it's not your face. You become the polite one, the easy one, the successful one, the one who gets it right, the one who makes others comfortable. And somewhere along the way, your own comfort stops matching. As the years pass, this prison evolves. It doesn't always look like chains. It looks like praise, like status, like approval. You get rewarded for staying small, for staying agreeable, for staying in line. You get used to smiling when you don't mean it, to saying yes when every part of you wants to scream no. You hide your pain behind politeness. You hide your dreams behind practicality. You hide your truth behind what's expected. And the world applauds you for it. Because a well-behaved person is easy to manage, predictable, safe. Then social media arrives, and the walls close in tighter. What used to be quiet pressure becomes constant surveillance. Now it's not just your family, your friends, your coworkers. You're performing for the world. Every post is a statement. Every photo is a test. Every opinion could cost you something. You start editing your life, not for truth, but for approval. You post what people will like. You delete what feels too raw. You become addicted to numbers, likes, shares, followers, as if they measure something real. But they don't. They measure conformity. They reward the version of you that fits in, not the one that stands out. And what does this cost you? More than you realize. You begin to make decisions based on fear, not desire. You choose a career not because it ignites your soul, but because it looks good on paper. You stay in relationships that drain you, because leaving would make you look unstable, weak, or selfish. You avoid risks. You avoid honesty. You avoid yourself. And slowly, the life you build becomes a mirror of everyone else's expectations, but not a reflection of who you truly are. This is why so many people feel lost. Not because they lack talent or motivation or opportunity, but because they've lost connection with their own inner voice. They've spent so long shaping themselves into something acceptable that they've forgotten what it feels like to be real. This is why the anxiety never fades, why the burnout keeps returning, why the emptiness persists no matter how much you achieve. Because you're living out a story that was written for you, not by you. And the worst part? Most of us never question it. Because this prison is invisible. It's disguised as success, as maturity, as responsibility. It's enforced not by force, but by fear, the fear of rejection, of disappointment, of being seen as different. So you stay quiet, you stay busy, you stay inside the lines, and you wonder why something always feels off. But here's the truth. You were not made to live inside a cage of approval. You were not made to silence your truth for the comfort of others. You were not made to shape your identity around what the world finds acceptable. You were made to live, fully, boldly, honestly. But that kind of life doesn't begin until you see the prison for what it is. Until you stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, what do I believe? That's the shift. That's the crack in the wall. And once you see it, really see it, you can never unsee it. The need for approval is not love. It's control. And freedom begins the moment you're willing to let go of who the world wants you to be, so you can finally become who you already are. What if the single greatest source of your suffering was your own need to control what you were never meant to? What if the constant anxiety, the self-doubt, the fear of judgment, the overthinking, it all came from focusing your energy on things that were never truly yours to govern? This is where the ancient Stoics offer a truth that is both simple and revolutionary. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. That's the starting point. That's the line that separates peace from chaos, freedom from slavery. Not external slavery, but the psychological slavery of trying to manage the uncontrollable. This idea comes from Epictetus, a man who knew the meaning of limitation better than most. Born a slave, physically disabled, and stripped of almost every external freedom, he discovered something that most people never realize even with everything handed to them. True power lives in the mind. Not in possessions, not in reputation, not in status, but in your ability to govern your own thoughts, reactions, and choices. He taught that freedom is not about what happens to you. It's about how you choose to meet it. Think about this deeply. You don't control what people think of you. You don't control their opinions, their expectations, their praise, or their criticism. You don't control outcomes, luck, timing, or the world's response to your efforts. You don't even control your own body completely. Aging, illness, accidents, they come without permission. But what is under your control? Your perspective, your actions, your response, your values, your character. When you anchor yourself in these things, the storm outside can rage, but your center remains unshaken. To the Stoics, this clarity of control is the ultimate form of power. When you stop trying to win approval and start living by your own code, you become dangerous, not in a reckless way, but in a way that makes you untouchable by the petty judgments of others. You walk into rooms without needing validation. You speak without rehearsing a version of yourself that others might prefer. You take risks without asking for permission, because you're no longer acting to be accepted, you're acting in alignment with who you are. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at the time, wrote in his private journal, "If you're pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now." Imagine that, a Roman emperor surrounded by enemies, betrayal, and endless responsibility, realizing that even in the middle of chaos, the most valuable territory to rule was always within. The Stoics didn't ignore pain. They didn't pretend life was easy. They embraced suffering as a teacher, not a curse. When insulted, they didn't retaliate. They questioned whether the insult had any truth, and if it didn't, they let it pass like wind. When they failed, they didn't collapse into self-pity. They analyzed what was within their control and moved forward. When they were humiliated, they didn't shrink. They reminded themselves that dignity isn't given by others. It's lived, daily, internally. Now, imagine applying this to your own life. What if, instead of obsessing over being liked, you obsessed over being honest? What if, instead of fearing rejection, you practiced presence? Instead of letting others' opinions drive your choices, you grounded yourself in principle? You no longer need to manage your image. You no longer exhaust yourself guessing what people expect. You'd walk through your day with a quiet certainty. I am not here to be approved. I am here to be real. This shift is not about becoming careless. It's about becoming clear. Clear about what belongs to you and what never did. Clear about what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Clear about the difference between influence and control. Because when you live in alignment with your values, not other people's preferences, you reclaim your power. You become immune to the roller coaster of external opinion. Not because you've hardened yourself, but because you've awakened to something deeper. Peace is not found in changing the world opinion of you. It's found in no longer needing it. So pause for a moment and truly consider, how would your life look if you no longer feared being misunderstood? How would your relationships change? Your work? Your decisions? How much more of your life would be yours, instead of a performance for someone else? This isn't a fantasy. This is the path Stoicism lays before you. And all it takes to begin is a single, quiet commitment. I will only give my energy to what I can control. The rest? Let go. Because the moment you stop trying to please the world, you start becoming whole. What if trying to please others was not an act of kindness, but a way of running from yourself? What if beneath the smiles, the politeness, the constant yes when you want to say no, there was fear? Not fear of failure, not fear of pain, but fear of rejection, fear of being disliked, fear of no longer being needed, valued, or loved. This fear hides in everyday decisions, in the way you speak, in the way you hold back, in the way you shape your identity to fit into the mold of what others want you to be. And it's exactly this fear that the courage to be disliked dares you to confront. This book, rooted in the psychological principles of Alfred Adler and shaped into a direct, piercing narrative, offers an idea that can transform everything. You are not responsible for how others feel about you. That is not your task. Your task is to live honestly, to speak your truth, and to walk in alignment with your values. How someone reacts to that, whether they like it, approve of it, or even understand it, is their task, not yours. This concept is called the separation of tasks. It may sound simple, but it has the power to shatter decades of emotional conditioning. Because here's the truth. Many people spend their entire lives carrying problems that don't belong to them. You say what others want to hear, not because you agree, but because you fear what silence might cost. You avoid speaking your needs, not because they aren't real, but because you don't want to seem difficult. You constantly monitor the temperature of every room you're in, gauging moods, adjusting yourself, calculating what version of you is safest to present. But every time you do that, you step further away from who you really are. You become a mirror, reflecting others, while your real self disappears behind the glass. And here's where the trap is most dangerous. Pleasing others can look like compassion, but often it's control in disguise. You try to keep people happy so they won't leave. You try to be agreeable so they won't argue. You try to be perfect so they won't find a reason to abandon you. It feels like love, but it's fear. It feels like connection, but it's dependency. And that dependency is what keeps you small. Because as long as you need to be liked, you will never feel free to be real. The book challenges this deeply. It forces you to confront a terrifying, yet freeing truth. You can be rejected and still be whole. You can be misunderstood and still be worthy. You can disappoint others and still remain in alignment with yourself. Real emotional freedom doesn't come from controlling how the world sees you. It comes from letting go of the need to be seen a certain way at all. And here's a powerful mental exercise. Imagine this. You tell your truth. You stand in your values. You make a decision that's right for you, even if it's unpopular. And someone disapproves. They criticize. They reject. They distance themselves. Now pause and picture yourself not collapsing under that weight, but standing still, breathing deeply, feeling no need to explain or fix it, just at peace. Can you imagine that version of you? One who is unshaken by rejection. One who understands that being disliked is not a failure. It's a byproduct of living authentically. That is the courage the book speaks of. The courage to stop editing yourself in real time. The courage to release the responsibility of others' emotions. The courage to let go of being liked in order to be free. This isn't about arrogance. It's not about becoming selfish. It's about becoming sovereign. About recognizing that people's opinions are shaped by their beliefs, their wounds, their perspectives, and those have nothing to do with your worth. When you start living this way, something shifts. The noise gets quieter. The anxiety loosens its grip. You stop walking on eggshells. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop asking for permission to be yourself. Yes, some people will leave. Some won't understand. But others, the right ones, will finally see you. Not a filtered version, not a polished performance, but the raw, unedited truth of who you are. And they will respect you for it, even if they don't agree, even if they never say it. This is what the courage to be disliked invites you to discover. That your peace is not found in being approved, it's found in being aligned. That your strength is not in perfection, it's in presence. That your worth does not increase with validation, it already is. And when you stop living for applause, you start living for purpose. You stop chasing acceptance, and you start standing in your truth. That is where real freedom begins. And it begins the moment you decide, I no longer need to be liked to live fully. There's a word that has the power to unlock everything you've been searching for: peace, purpose, and presence. A word so simple, yet so difficult for many to say. That word is no, not out of anger. Not out of rebellion, but out of truth. The kind of no that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. The kind that draws a line between your energy and everyone else's expectations. And yet, for most people, this word is terrifying. Because saying no means risking disapproval. It means letting someone down. It means choosing yourself in a world that constantly tells you that self-sacrifice is virtue. From a young age, we're taught that no is dangerous. When you say no to authority, you're punished. When you say no to your peers, you're excluded. When you say no to tradition, you're labeled rebellious. Slowly, you learn that to be accepted, you must comply. You must agree. You must go along. Even when your body says stop, even when your heart says no. And so the habit begins. You smile when you're uncomfortable. You say yes to things that drain you. You prioritize other people's feelings over your own truth. You become reliable, but resentful, helpful, but hollow, pleasant, but painfully out of alignment. And that's the trap. You start believing that your worth is tied to your ability to say yes. That if you're available, generous, flexible, then maybe, just maybe, you'll be loved. But love that depends on your compliance isn't love. It's conditional acceptance. It's connection built on performance. And when your life is built around avoiding rejection, you end up rejecting yourself. The truth is, saying no is one of the most courageous and self-loving acts you can perform. Because no is not rejection, it's a boundary, a declaration, a statement of self-respect. It says, I know my limits, I know what I have to give, and I will not abandon myself to meet your expectations. It's not about being cold or unkind. It's about recognizing that you are responsible for your energy, your time, your peace. No one else will protect it for you. That's your job. But saying no is not easy at first. It triggers fear, fear of judgment, fear of conflict, fear of loss. You'll worry about what others will think. You'll question whether you're being selfish. You'll feel guilty. But guilt is not always a signal that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes, guilt is just the echo of your old programming. The voice that's used to putting others first. And the only way to reprogram that voice is to act in spite of it. To say no anyway. Not harshly, not defensively, but with calm conviction. Authenticity isn't an abstract concept. It's a practice, a muscle, 1,000 small choices you make each day. It's in how you respond to an invitation you don't want to accept, It's in how you protect your rest when others demand your energy. It's in how you say, I can't do this, or this doesn't feel right, even when it disappoints someone you care about. These aren't grand, heroic gestures. They're simple moments of truth. And every time you choose yourself in one of these moments, you grow stronger, more whole, more free. There are people who've transformed their entire lives by learning how to say no. One woman spent years working in a job that looked impressive but left her empty. Every morning, she woke up with anxiety. Every night, she went to bed feeling like a stranger in her own life. Until one day, she said no, not just to the job, but to the version of herself that was performing success for others. And in that moment, she didn't just quit a career. She reclaimed her voice. Another man spent his life pleasing everyone around him. Family, friends, co-workers. Always available, always agreeable, until he realized he was surrounded by people who liked him for what he gave, not who he was. Saying no cost him some connections, but what remained was real. What remained gave him space to breathe again. He stopped being everyone's solution and started becoming his own. You don't need to burn everything down to reclaim your life. You just need to start with one boundary, one honest no, one decision that reflects who you are, not who you think you're supposed to be. The people who truly love you won't leave when you set boundaries. They'll respect you more. And the people who disappear were only ever connected to the mask you wore, not the truth you carry. So ask yourself, where in your life are you overcommit, overextended, overwhelmed? Where are you saying yes when your entire being is saying no? What would it feel like to take your energy back? To stand in your truth without apology? To disappoint others and still sleep peacefully at night? Because your freedom won't begin when everything is perfect. It won't begin when everyone approves. Your freedom begins with a quiet, powerful, unapologetic no, a no to what doesn't align, a no to who you're not, and most of all, a no to the idea that you must earn your right to rest, to speak, to exist. From that no, everything begins to change. There's a kind of freedom that doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It doesn't come with applause or recognition or celebration. It comes in the form of silence. A deep, steady silence. The kind that settles over you when you realize that you no longer need to explain who you are. Not because you've given up, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand. You owe no one an explanation for your existence. For years, you may have used your voice to defend yourself, to justify your choices, to make sure others understood your intentions, your reasons, your heart. You told your story in a way that would be accepted. You polished the edges. You filtered the flaws. You tried to be clear, agreeable, pleasing. But underneath it all was a hidden belief that being misunderstood was dangerous, that being disliked was failure, that being questioned meant you had done something wrong. So you over-explained. You over-apologized. You tried to prove, again and again, that you were enough. But there comes a turning point, a quiet, internal shift, a moment where you feel the weight of constantly proving yourself, and you choose to set it down. Not out of anger, not out of defiance, but because you realize it was never your burden to carry. You begin to understand something powerful. Real confidence is not loud. It does not beg to be seen. It does not need to be explained. It simply exists, rooted, calm, complete. This is the silence of approval. Not the approval of others, but your own. The silence that replaces the need to be validated. The silence that follows when you stop arguing with criticism, stop chasing applause, stop explaining your every move to people who were never meant to understand. You stop rehearsing conversations in your mind. You stop defending your no. You stop trying to justify your dreams. You live quietly, boldly, clearly. You are no longer performing. And in that silence, something else emerges, peace. Peace that doesn't come from being seen, but from finally seeing yourself. Peace that isn't shaken by rejection or misinterpretation, because you've stopped tying your identity to anyone else's perception. You're no longer a mirror, reflecting what others want to see. You are a window, clear, open, grounded in what's real. This is the highest form of authenticity. Not shouting who you are from the rooftops, not demanding that others agree, but knowing deeply, fully, that you are already whole, that your worth is not up for debate, that your path does not require public approval. You no longer need to be the version of yourself that pleases the crowd. You've outgrown that role. You've outgrown the need to be explained. Because here's the truth. You are the author of your own life. But as long as you keep writing your story for the audience, for their applause, their comfort, their expectations, you will never reach the ending that is truly yours. A story written to please everyone always loses its voice. It becomes hollow, edited, restrained. But the moment you stop writing for them, the moment you pick up the pen with your own hand, your own language, your own truth, something changes. You stop wondering how your story will be received. You start wondering how deeply you can live it. You write without fear, without filter, without apology. Because now, the story isn't about being liked. It's about being real. And in that authenticity, in that silence where no explanation is needed, you find something no approval could ever offer: freedom. So let's return to the question that started this entire journey. What if everything you're doing isn't really for you? What if the job you chose, the way you speak, the things you chase, even the goals you set, were never about your own fulfillment, but about being seen a certain way, about keeping others comfortable, about meeting invisible standards you never agreed to? And if that's true, what would it mean to take your life back? What would it look like to live for yourself? Not for likes, not for approval, not for applause. What if your actions came from alignment instead of fear? What if your truth mattered more than your image? What if the version of you that doesn't need to perform was the version finally free? This isn't about changing everything overnight. It's about waking up to the choices you've been making unconsciously and beginning to choose differently. Not because you want to rebel, but because you want to return. Return to what feels real. Return to your voice. Return to a life that belongs to you. Not to your followers, not to your family, not to the crowd. To you. No more performing. No more proving. No more pretending. You don't need to earn your right to be here. You don't need to wait for validation to start being honest. You don't need to explain your dreams to people who were never meant to understand them. You don't need anyone's permission to be who you already are. That power has always been yours. And now it's time to use it.